Welcome back to the EU Life Info Days of the LIFE program. Now, after the first presentations this morning in the opening plenary session on the general and financial aspects of LIFE calls for proposals, we are here with more colleagues to answer your questions. So I see that colleagues are joining. Thank you in advance, and thank you also to the colleagues in the Slido back office who are taking the questions. Just quick reminder first of the Slido rules. That's we want to make sure that we can answer a maximum of your questions. But first of all, make sure that the questions are asked at the right moment, because they must be relevant, of course, depending on the available colleagues. And now the current question and answer session will be focused on the presentations we just had, so the general and financial aspects of the current live calls. And as many of you know already, when you ask a question, you post it in Slido. So you already joined us on Slido. Many of you already participated in the poll and also already sent a lot of questions, I see. Before you post a question, I would advise you to check if the question is already there, and if so, please like the question. And the more a question gets likes, the more it's popular, and the highest it would be in the list of questions. So it will be answered in priority. That's the main rule. And so just to let you know that if a question is not relevant to this session, for instance, a question that is very specific for a call, it will be dismissed for now, and we would ask you to come back at the time when we present that call and to ask this question at the end of the presentation, just to make sure that you get your answer. So let's see who is available of our colleagues. I see Anne Burrell, who did the presentation this morning. Hans should be with us as well. Agnieszka, also, who is Deputy Head of Unit in the Life, Climate and Energy units as Hans. And then we have Fabio, Leone, Zoe Wildiers, several colleagues in charge of different calls. So we hope that we will be able to answer a maximum of questions. So let's see, can we move on and see the questions in order of priority, please? I'm asking the back office. And in the meantime, of course, participants can keep on joining by scanning the QR code or by going to slido.com and typing #EULife25 so that you can post your questions. So when you are ready to start, we will display the questions and we can start answering. I will see which of our colleagues is the most, say, prepared or who can answer the question that is displayed on the screen. So please go on and show the questions. Okay, I don't know if we can display the questions actually on the screen. Otherwise, I will just read them. I mean, it's okay also to read them. So, there they are. Just a moment. Sorry, I'm trying to view this screen. I hope everybody can see the screen with the questions, because I see it's not maybe not displayed like the same for everybody. So now I can see the questions. So I will ask my colleagues to volunteer to answer. The first question is, what is the success rate for EU Life Funding Program? How many grants do you award versus how many applications you receive? I suppose maybe Anne or Fabio are the most indicated persons to answer the question. Fabio.
I can start and then colleagues can complement, because there is not a single answer, and the success rate across the different priority areas varies a lot. So to give you an indication, we are between 20% up to 60%, depending on the priority area. Circular economy and quality of life is around 20%, nature and biodiversity is around up to 60%, governance is 40%, and so on. So there is a lot of variation depending on the call, but this is more or less the ballpark of success rate, which, contrary to other programs, is not one-digit percentage. So there is good opportunities. I'll let others to complement if they want.
Yeah, I can speak as well. Sorry, Anne, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe this is what you were going to say also, Zoe, and you can add on. I mean, I think there are also two different things. One is how many projects pass, and then of those passing ones, how many actually get financed and which are on the reserve list. For some of the calls, and I would signal particularly the Nature and Biodiversity SAP call, we normally end up with a very long reserve list of projects that are of very good quality. They pass, but we don't have sufficient budget to finance them all. So it does vary definitely from one call to another, and it's your likelihood of getting financed is both the quality of your proposal, but of course the quality of the other applicants too, and it changes from year to year.
Yeah, fully correct. And I mean, I just can give some data if you want for the clean energy transition call for proposal. So I must say there for last year, so for the 2024 call, we also have quite a long reserve list. But in the end, for the time being, we managed to finance 17% of the submitted proposal. So this means they were successful and they were the most highly ranked, and there was budget available to finance these. I can say a trend for the past years on CET, we get more and more proposals in the last year, so competition is getting fiercer. And I think all the other sub-programs can relate to that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you for the answers. They were very complimentary. Can we have the second question, please? So the second question is, can LIFE program projects be submitted as mono-beneficiary, or is there a requirement to form a consortium? Who can reply?
I can start it, and it depends on the call. You have to look at the specific criteria. Some of them, I mean, as I mentioned, the traditional types of projects that come under the standard action projects, you can be either an individual entity applying, or you can have a partnership, a consortium. It very much depends on what you're trying to achieve. You need to have the right number of partners to achieve what you're planning to achieve. Some of the other calls, and Zoe may want to come back on this also, do require multiple partnership, and require multiple partnership of specific types. Strategic projects normally are submitted by the competent authority and should involve the key other actors involved in the targeted plan. So it'd be very strange to see a strategic project submitted only by one entity also. So it depends very much on the call.
Yes, and I can just indeed echo what you say. Where to look for that information is really the call document. So there's a call document per open call. You will find all the specificities in there. I'm again going to speak for Life Clean Energy Transition. As Hans Hein told you earlier in the morning, typically for clean energy transition, we're looking for larger consortia with minimum 3 organizations from 3 different eligible countries. But we do have some exceptions. We actually have 12 topics open under this call 2025. And out of these 12 topics, we have 4 topics for which it is possible to submit proposals by 1 or more organizations from a single country. So you'll find all the details in the call document.
If I can add
yes,
maybe...
of course, if you want to complete, Agnieszka.
Something on the overseas territories, because we are getting more and more interest also from this part of the globe. Just please, if you're applying from overseas territories, read exactly the text of the call, because some of the calls are open for overseas territories, some are not open. And it's also the technical assistant call. Not all of them are open. Some of them are very specific for the member states and the territory within the European Union on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we see the next question, please? So the question is with 35 likes, so quite popular one as well. Could a proposal involve a consortium composed exclusively of institutions from a single European country? Would such an approach be eligible under the sub-calls? Maybe Fabio?
The short answer, which reconnects basically to the previous one, in the case of SAP, yes, the freedom of submitting the proposal from a single beneficiary, from a single country, or a number of beneficiaries from the same country, there is quite flexibility all across in terms of the consortia compositions, which should relate more on the activities to be performed rather than on the requirements of the call.
Okay, if nobody wants to add anything, we can pass to the next question. Thank you for your reply, Fabio. So the next question is, in the event that freelance professionals are involved, is it necessary to identify them in the application, or can we include a general provision under subcontracting costs?
I can maybe take the question.
Maybe
Eva?
Anne, who is head of sector finance in Cinea. Thank you, Anne.
Yes, so effective, these freelance professionals can be hired as natural persons, then they can be put under the staff cost category, so the A2 category. This means that they are either natural persons or hired through their own company that is not employing any other staff. Otherwise, if they cannot fit there, then it's probably part of the purchase cost category for the services. Because subcontracting, this is only for outsourced action tasks that are fully outsourced to either it can be a freelance professional or another type of company, but this is very particular. So it's probably either under the A2 cost category or under the cost category for purchases.
Thank you, Anne. And the next question, I can read it if it's not displayed. And there it is. Is the 60% funding, another question for you, Anne, allocated to each consortium partner, or is it a global allocation for the global project? It actually says question regarding project management.
Well, in any case, the 60% funding or any other percentage funding that is related to the call, it is linked to the particular project, and it is also valid for each of the different participants. So for each of the beneficiaries, affiliated entities, it can never be more than 60% or the percentage mentioned in the call. This means that if one beneficiary would, for example, need to have a funding of 75% in order to be able to participate, then it can also be that other beneficiaries contribute to this, but then the maximum that can be requested is 60%, and then other beneficiaries that don't need the 60% can maybe award part of their contribution to this beneficiary, and then this should be handled in the consortium agreement. So the maximum in the budget that can be requested is the percentage from the call. This is individually as for the entire project, and any other changes, if somebody needs more, then it should go into the consortium agreement, and the arrangement should be put there.
Maybe I can complement that. I mean, we encourage all projects to establish all multi-beneficiary projects to establish a consortium agreement. But the content of that agreement is entirely up to the different partners. It's not something that we get involved in, but that is where the different partners can agree to any division of responsibilities or sharing of finance, something that is outside of the grant agreement, and therefore the responsibility and choice of the partners, not something that is ruled by the rules of the call or the EU financial regulation.
Thank you both. Let's move to the next question. I see there are quite a lot of questions, so we try to speed up a little bit. The next question is, how do I know if my project is a strategic project or a standard action project?
I can take that quickly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you need to read the calls, and I hope that by the end of this info session, you'll have a better idea of the difference. But basically, a strategic project is a special type of project that is aiming towards the ultimate full implementation of certain specific eligible plans. They're plans that are linked to EU policy and normally required through a piece of EU legislation. So, for instance, a river basin management plan. Strategic projects must involve the competent authority. They must involve the appropriate stakeholders. They must mobilize complementary finance for complementary actions. So there are a set of very specific criteria for being a strategic project. If your project doesn't meet those criteria, more likely it's a standard action project.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Yes, by default, it's generally standard action project. Next question is, how actively companies, SMEs in particular, participate in live projects? In what ways, for example? Who can reply?
Yeah.
Fabio?
Yeah. Well, indeed, first of all, it depends on the priority areas. There are priority areas or sub-programs in which small medium enterprises are more involved than others, but that in some cases will result obvious if you read the code documents. And others which are more active, for example, the climate goal, the circular economy goal, where small medium enterprises do participate. Statistically difficult. I think last time we looked at it, we had 30% of small medium enterprises within the private commercial entities. So there is a good participation, notwithstanding that there is no specific advantages for small medium enterprises to participate or not, or we don't have a mechanism to follow that directly. So it's still high compared also to other programs. In what ways? Very difficult in many different ways. I don't know. I take again circular economy and quality of life sector. They can be the one that have developed technologies and want to get finance for the implementation of this technology. They can be the one that are piloting someone else's technologies. There are those that have been trained for whatever other tools or instruments which they support them in their activities. There is a wide range of possible potential activities that the small medium enterprises can do in life as all other companies. So again, I would suggest you have a look at the Life Project database, and you will have a sample of what kind of activities companies are involved with, and you will have a lot of examples there.
Yes, thank you, Fabio. In fact, SMEs are very present among our beneficiaries. Now, the next question is, does a project for testing an integrated satellite technique for more accurately measuring fugitive landfill methane fit in EU LIFE funding? And if so, which sub-program would it fit in? I think Anne can answer this question.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think you do need to consider whether or not it's a research project. If it's a research project, it doesn't fit under LIFE. But more generally, we are not able to give you advice on whether or not your specific project idea fits under LIFE funding or under which sub-program. You need to read the documents yourself and make a determination of whether or not it fits closely enough to invest in making an application. I mean, that's because of we need to ensure equal opportunity and no preferential treatment for any applicants. However, there is someone who can give you advice, and that is your national contact point. So I would strongly suggest that you get in touch with your national contact point, and they can give their opinion on whether or not your idea fits well in the LIFE program.
Thank you, Anne. The next question, it's a financial question, so maybe for Anne Malen. Can a public agency claim for a budget to redistribute to SMEs through a call for projects like cascade funding? For example, projects to be selected are technological solutions to implement circular economy.
Well, I think that cascading grants are not the real subject of these call for proposals that are launched. They are financial support to third parties. Sub-granting is only part of it, or can be part of it if it would fit with the project's objectives. So, and then still the financial support to third party is limited. It depends on the call. It can be maximum 100,000 euro or 200,000 euro for the project, and normally maximum 60,000 euro for the third party. And the financial support to third party, in fact, it is aimed at assisting entities outside the project partnership in the implementation or development of local initiatives that will contribute to the project's objectives. So from what I understand from this question, it's more aimed at maybe projects that only focus on financial support to third parties, and this is not part of these calls.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Next question. Do we have to demonstrate co-funding? This is still for you, Anna.
Yes. So normally in the budget that you will have to propose, if you submit a proposal, you will need to, at one side, detail all your costs in the different cost categories. And then at the other side, you will have to define the revenue. So how will these costs be financed? So part, of course, will be by the EU contribution, but then you will also need to indicate how you will finance the part that we are not financing. So it can be through own funding, it can be through income of the project, it can also be through other co-funders that would provide you with the money to co-finance this project. So you will need to include it there. In the past, we asked also that in some cases you need to fill this document on co-funding from third parties. I think it's no longer mandatory to have these things confirmed, but it is your responsibility if you submit a proposal to make sure that you can co-fund through these different types of funding yourself the remaining part that we are not financing. And we will see also whether if you're a private entity, you have the financial capacity to do this.
Yes, thanks a lot. So the next question might be for Anne Barham, maybe. Although life is not research-oriented, can universities or research centers submit a proposal that fully complies with the call requirements? If so, under what status, lead, affiliated entity, or another? Do they get funding, and at what rate?
The short answer is yes, definitely. There are no restrictions on the type of entity which can apply to grants for life, neither as the lead nor as a partner in general. We already said there are some calls have specific requirements on the types of beneficiaries, but for instance, with the standard action projects, certainly a university or research institute can participate, could even be a mono beneficiary, could certainly be part of a participant. They get funded exactly the same rate as everyone else. What's important is that the project is having impact on the ground, is meeting all the other requirements of the call.
Thank you, Anne. The next question, I think there is a typo because it says, what are the eligible countries? I suppose it means what are the eligible countries, and is there any limitation for participation of companies and non-profit organizations? Maybe Anna or Fabio, who can reply?
If you want, I can say.
Oh, Agnieszka, okay.
Yeah, so all the member states plus the associated countries to the LIFE program. And in the call, you have the specific countries. Currently, it's Iceland, Moldova, Ukraine, and one more that I forgot, sorry.
North Macedonia.
And for some of the North Macedonia. And there will be one more, Montenegro, that will be most likely signing or is planning to sign the association agreement with us in the coming days. So they will be also eligible. And as I said, the overseas territories, depending on the call, sometimes they're eligible, sometimes not. And then all the different entities are eligible, depending again on the call, because in some calls they're excluded for the reasons that Amber said, so that we need responsible authorities.
Okay, thanks, Agnieszka. Next question. Is it not obligatory anymore to upload co-financing declarations at project application? Can you give advice to member states that are having national co-financing? What would the best way be to arrange national co-financing process? Suppose this is for Anne Vermalen.
Well, I think maybe it's better for Anne or...
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah.
I can take it. Yes, indeed, as a simplification, we have decided not to require the uploading of co-financing declarations anymore. It's as Anne Vermalen said before, as an applicant, it's your responsibility to find the other co-financing, and our grants are never conditional on a certain source. You need to make sure that you are able to finance it one way or the other. And concerning the national co-financing, and each country is a little different. Some have it, some don't, and that's something you need to investigate with your national authorities. It's not something that we're directly involved in from SINEA. So I would recommend that you contact your national contact point, and they can give you advice on how to approach that.
Yes, indeed, national contact points are always there to support you, and especially if you have specific questions on your country or member state. Next question, is it eligible to involve a consultancy in the consortium for project management tasks? If yes, what is the best way? Who can take this question?
Well, I would say from cost eligibility point of view, of course, costs can be eligible for consultancy that is helping with project management tasks. However, it cannot be tasks that are really only targeted or possible for the coordinating beneficiary. So I would say if you hire somebody as a natural person, of course, they can assist you. Otherwise, you need to pay attention that you don't outsource or that you don't contract coordination tasks. What type of tasks and how it's the best way that I would maybe look at my colleagues, but I would say that normally we would assume that when you apply for the call if you submit a proposal, that you would have the resources to also take care of the project management tasks. If you don't, you can of course contract them. But the type and the best way, I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's up to the applicant to determine the best way, but I would just emphasize what you said, that I mean, if you're submitting an application as a lead beneficiary, you normally should have an active role in the project, including the main coordination tasks. If you are outsourcing it all, that might lead to a lower score on some of the award criteria.
Thank you both. The next question is, can the construction of a production plant be financed by a LIFE project start before the grant signature, although after the proposal submission? So there's a production plant whose construction starts before the beginning of the project, but after the submission of the proposal. Is that eligible?
Well, in any case, only costs incurred during the action. So the start date of the action is the determining factor whether cost can be eligible. So not when the grant is signed. So it depends. Sometimes the grant is signed after the start date. Then, of course, as of the start date, certain costs can be eligible, as long as, of course, all the eligibility criteria of this plant, if the plant would meet the eligibility criteria. So, but it is the start date of the project that is determining whether it's eligible or not. Until the end date.
I can add on to that. I mean, in general, the start date of the project is after the signature. It is possible that we will accept a start date before the signature, but indeed after the proposal submission. But this needs to be justified, first of all. It needs to be explained why the actions need to be started before the signature. Most often that is allowed for seasonality reasons, some kind of factor related to temperature or other aspects of seasonality. But there can be other reasons for it also, but it needs to be justified. And in all cases, until the grant is signed, it's of course at the full risk and responsibility of the applicant.
Thank you. The complementary answers. Next question. Still about eligibility of cost. If for the pilot we purchase the individual elements, skid, hydraulics, valves, pumps, filters, measuring devices, etc., and based on our accounting system, these materials are considered as consumables, are these equipment or other costs?
Well, it all depends how you would then qualify the equipment that is built. So, of course, initially, all these different elements are like consumables, but if you put them into an equipment, it can be that this equipment all these costs should then go under the equipment category. So you will need to see whether this equipment that you have built will be registered in a fixed asset account or not. And then you need to follow your accounting rules in that. So if this is in a fixed asset account, you will need to put it under equipment. If it is not, then you will use the other costs, the purchase costs for goods.
Thank you, Anne. Next question. Is there an indicative national budget allocation for standard action projects? Maybe Fabio can reply.
Short answer, no. There is no allocations for SAP, national allocation for SAP. The budgets are exclusively evaluated against quality and our criteria. You can find this in the section 9 of the call documents.
Okay, thank you, Fabio, for the quick reply and clear. So the next question is, in the grant agreement, is the 60% funding allocated to each consortium partner, or is it a global allocation for the global project? So this is
I think we already answered the question previously.
Yeah.
So with 60%, it is maximum for each consortium partner, but it's also the maximum for the entire grant.
Yes, thanks. Let's move on to the next question. What is the meaning of indicative funding? Will the applicants that ask less than 60% financing from LIFE be higher ranked than the applicants that ask 60% financing? Maybe Anne?
Well, this is an award criteria on the resources. We look to value for money. So I would not say that automatically a proposal would be higher ranked if applicants ask less than the 60%. But I look to my operational colleagues to confirm this.
I think this is indeed the case. I mean, yeah. it obviously is a consideration, as you say, in the measurement of the award criteria with regard to resource efficiency. But I mean, there are many other criteria which judge the funding and the quality of the projects.
Okay, thank you both. Next question. What is a healthy ratio of subcontracting costs and infrastructure investments within the total budget?
Okay, I think no one's jumping on this because there's no clear answer. There's no magic number. It depends what you're trying to accomplish with your project and what the needs are. And I think we can't give you an answer. Obviously, you shouldn't have more subcontracting than necessary, but if there's a specific skill that's needed and you can bring it in credibly through subcontracting, respecting all the rules on subcontracting, that's fine. Infrastructure, well, I mean, if you need to build something as a pilot for testing, some kind of solution, a certain amount of infrastructure can be built in, but we don't generally finance large infrastructure projects per se. And so it should be well justified why you're putting these elements in the budget. And it comes down to that award criterion Anne-Vermeulen mentioned before, which is value for money.
Thank you, Anne. Now, a question maybe for Zoe, because it's about clean energy transition call. Under the new CET call doc, it suggests there will be a prepayment and then no interim payments and then a final payment. Is this the case? I don't know if it's for...
Yes, but it's not new. I would say it's been a few years indeed. We work with pre-financings, and so the payment, so the actual acceptance of the cost will only come at the very end. So that's fully correct. But please note, it's not because you receive pre-financing halfway, that all the costs, of course, have been accepted. It's possible at the very end that some costs are considered ineligible, and then they will have to be recovered. But indeed, we work with pre-financings.
And that's the general rule in life now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, is it possible that a beneficiary receives more EC contribution than the theoretical maximum calculated by the system if other beneficiaries request less, so the overall rate of EC co-funding for the total project is within the threshold?
I think we already answered more or less this question previously. So yes, beneficiaries can have more if others don't use up. But this is then arranged within the consortium agreement. In the budget, it will maximum be the 60% or any other percentage that is linked to the call that every beneficiary can get. But outside the grant agreement, you can take other arrangements.
Okay, thank you. Now, question maybe for Zoe. In case of a submission of a redress letter, what are the typical times to receive an answer?
Yes, so just to explain, a redress is once you get notified on the outcome of the proposal, you have a certain time frame to react. Typically, it's around 4 months that we have to come back to the person who sent a request for redress. So maybe I can expand a bit on that. I mean, if you get the result of your application, please note that a committee will be set up in case you submit a complaint, but that redress committee will only look at if procedurally there were any things that didn't go right. They will not reevaluate necessarily because you think it's been unfair. Of course, if from the procedure something went wrong, this will be, of course, looked at. Just a few words here, because we see many resubmissions of proposals, which is good, but you have to take a few elements in mind, because some people improve just a few elements and expect to have a higher score the year after. But this is not necessarily the case. So I can speak for clean energy transition. And please remember that we have a call document with clear priorities that is evolving year after year. So we have quite tight narrow, I would say, this topic descriptions. And it's possible that your proposal 1 year fits perfectly in there, but the next year, not anymore. So please bear this in mind. It could be even considered out of scope or less relevant. Also, you have to bear in mind that the state of the art is evolving, so something may not be that relevant anymore. And remember as well that competition evolves and is fiercer year after year. So this can explain why people expect a better score the year after. So when they resubmit and improve, and it's not necessarily the case. So bear this in mind.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. It's very clear, and it's good to point it out as well, so that people don't have false expectations. Next question. Can a consortium of UN organizations apply for the LIFE 2025 call? Who could answer it? And any volunteer?
I can take that. The call documents clearly identify that international organizations may apply to LIFE. Obviously, it would need to be shown why it's relevant, as for any other application. There are some specificities during the implementation related to what are called the FAFA agreements. I have to say that we don't have a lot of UN organizations applying in LIFE, so we don't have full experience really on applying the FAFA, which is the agreement between the United Nations and the European Commission on various aspects of financing. I think that is something that maybe we can clarify better if you put a written question. However, the short answer is that yes, UN organizations may apply.
I can maybe complement that we will use our grant agreement, the template that is available. There are specific, in that case, specific clauses targeted to international organizations. So there are parts of the grant agreement that can be customized in line with what is inside the FAFA. It's, for example, on the law to be used, or in case of disputes. But in general, you will need to follow the rules of the call. So yeah, further specificities can be discussed in case your proposal would be selected.
Thank you. I think the next question is also for you, Anne Vermalen. It's a financial question. Subcontractors, what is the maximum percentage of project budget that can be provided to subcontractors? From which amount is a tender procedure mandatory?
Well, as already mentioned before, there is no maximum percentage. There is, however, a percentage of 30% on the project level that we have put for further justifications, because normally we would expect that beneficiaries or that applicants who apply for a grant and that submit a project proposal, that they have the operational capacity to carry this out. If they would need more than 30% subcontracting, they need to justify it. And then they need, in order to select subcontractors, they need to apply their own procurement rules for as long as, of course, they foresee value for money and no conflict of interest. So there is no specific threshold anymore like we used to have in the previous LIFE program.
Yes, thank you. I'm afraid the next questions are still for you, Anne. So
for pre-financing, yes.
Financial questions. Additional pre-financing, does it mean that the Commission will pay 30% plus 50% or 50%?
Well, the first pre-financing normally is always 30%. There are some exceptions, but the big majority, it's 30%. Or for projects that do not have further pre-financings, they only have final payment there, they will get 60%. Then further pre-financing, normally we have one period where we will then, after the reporting, we will pay 50%. In some cases, it can be split into 25-25, depending on the particular situation of the project. So it is 30 plus 50, and then the remaining part is for the final payment. This is based on actual cost. For the SIP and the SNAP projects there, and maybe some specific other cases, we have interim payments, and there, after the first pre-financing, it will always be based on actual cost. So, but these are a minority of projects.
Thank you, Anne. Now, for a project with a duration of multiple years, how do you index the payroll cost?
Well, I assume that this question is linked to how you need to calculate the daily rate. You normally need to do it per person that is working over the lifetime of the project or over the reporting periods, if you have a SIP or a SNAP or projects that are subject to interim payments and not further pre-financing payments. But in most cases, you will have only one reporting period, and then you need to take the total salary cost of that person and divide it by, if you have a one-year project, it will be divided by 215, and otherwise the pro rata of the 215, so 5 times 215 if it is a 5-year project. So, but you take the total payroll cost.
Maybe I can just add, I mean, I think there are two ways to read this question. One is, how do you make the budget in the application? And the other is, what will ultimately be reimbursed? And I mean, for the budget, you do, the best you can for the future. What Anne was talking about is how ultimately which costs will be accepted as eligible costs at the time of payment.
Yeah, normally for the budget, if it's only to fix the budget, you just take for the specific persons that would work or the categories of persons that would work, you can take the monthly salary cost and then you multiply it with the number of months that this person would work, and then you do the same for everybody else who will work. So that is easier than using the 215, which will be used for the reporting, as Anne said.
Thank you. Next question is, should each partner submit their own application and budget in the funding and tender portal, or should the coordinator submit a single comprehensive budget form on behalf of all partners? I'm afraid this is for you, Anna.
Yeah, well, but normally all beneficiaries, they will need to upload their budget in the system individually. The beneficiaries who work with affiliated entities, they will also have to upload for this affiliated entity the budget also through the portal, because I don't believe that the affiliated entity can do it themselves. And then the system will make a consolidated budget for the entire project.
Thanks.
So, I mean, there's one overall application per project, but there may be different elements that need to be uploaded.
Okay, let's move to the next question. We only have 10 minutes left. Could you clarify what is the purpose of the new and necessary guidance on funding for activities related to the development, implementation, monitoring, and enforcement of union legislation and policy? This must be for Anne Barrel.
Yes. I guess that's me. Yes. I mean, this is a guidance that was established at the central level in the Commission. It is not specific to LIFE. It covers all the financing programs and all types of grants. And it was instituted to make sure that there are no activities included in any of the EU grant agreements that would be considered inappropriate. So you can find it on the Commission website and you can read exactly what is written there.
Yes, it's publicly available. Next question. We're a fully remote organization registered and with headquarters in Belgium. Can employees from an eligible Belgian entity who are resident in a non-eligible country, for example, the UK or other, work on LIFE projects and claim expenses?
Well, it all depends if the employees are on the payroll of this Belgium headquartered entity, and if they are actually employees. If not employees, but they are natural persons hired in another country, then still you need to make sure that they are not hired through another organization, because then they will not be considered employees. So it all depends whether they match the definition of employees and if their costs are in the payroll of the entity that is in our grant agreement.
Yes, Anne, stay with us. We have a few more questions on financial issues. Sorry. So the next question is, how are incomes presented in the budget? How are incomes affecting the EU contribution? Could you explain the profit rule and give a clear example?
Well, I can say that at proposal stage, you will need to identify the sources of income to match the cost that you have included in your budget. At the end of the project, there will be the reporting, and there you will have to list the income of the project. And if the income of the project is higher than the share that you would normally were foreseen to contribute yourself, then the difference, if there is profit, will be deducted. So you will receive less EU funding, because we cannot pay more than the maximum foreseen. So if you have more income generated by the project, then, for example, the 40% that you have to finance yourself, then the difference will be deducted.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Well, the next question I can even reply. It's about operating grants. I have heard that this presentation will not cover anything related to operating grants. I have questions about timesheets and hope to get more info during this presentation. But in fact, I'm sorry, this is not the right place to ask because there is no open call on operating grants. And your question might be more about how to report on operating grants that are already existing. But maybe somebody wants to add something. But I agree that this question might not be relevant.
Yeah, maybe the person can send the question to the mailbox.
Yes, yes. Please note there is a functional mailbox called Cinea-life-inquiries. You will see it at the end of the event, and where you can ask all your questions on ongoing grants. So this is really to inform potential applicants for future projects and for the ongoing calls for proposals. Next question is still financial. Anne, sorry. If volunteers work for free, why would you need to submit costs in budget table? What kind of costs under personal costs could be submitted?
Well, it is not really a cost to CUR. It is more a unit cost to qualify the work that volunteers do. And in reply to that, we will then calculate the corresponding EU funding. So in fact, this would, if you use volunteers, it could increase your EU funding artificially. Because we would recognize that the work done by these volunteers, even if they don't generate actual cost, we can take it into account for the calculation of the EU funding. But it is based on unit costs, of course. It's not actual cost because volunteers are not paid. It's also further explained in the annotated grant agreement.
Thank you, Anne. The next question is not financial, it's for our operational colleagues. Can you please explain the difference between standard action projects and SIP and SNAPs? So SIPs and SNAPs.
Okay, I can try again.
Integrated projects and strategic nature projects, but I will let Anne reply. Thanks.
Yeah, I can try again, and I'm sorry if I wasn't entirely clear before. I think that the full answer, you need to both read the call documents and attend the sessions on the strategic action projects and the strategic projects under the thematic sessions that will be following. But basically, the standard action projects are typical life projects that are addressing some problem on the ground and trying to show how to implement a solution. It has to be a problem that's related to the implementation of the EU environment and climate policy and legislation, but it's quite broad. There are certain project topics that are prioritized in the call document. You'll see those, but there are limited restrictions on who can apply or what's included. The strategic projects, there are two types. There are the strategic nature projects under the Nature and Biodiversity subprogram, and there are the strategic integrated projects under the Circular Economy, Quality of Life, and the climate subprograms. All of these strategic projects must have as their objective to catalyze the full ultimate implementation of the target plan or strategy. And the eligible plans and strategies are listed in the call documents. So it's a very specific type of project. They're large projects because these target plans and strategies are quite comprehensive, and they normally cover a large area. In fact, that's also a requirement for the strategic projects, that they cover a large area. These projects must involve the competent authority for the plan, preferably as the leader, and they must mobilize financing from other sources for complementary actions that are done in coordination with the LIFE project. So you you can see that they're a much more specific type of call, normally submitted by the competent authority for the target plan. But I would encourage you, if that's still not clear, I encourage you to read the documents and go to the relevant sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see it's already 12 noon and time flies. I don't know if our speakers can stay another 5-10 minutes or shall we close it? Maybe take a couple of more questions if you don't mind. And then I will ask our audience to send the questions that are not answered to the functional mail list. So the next question is, are employees hired through a professional employer organization eligible to work on live projects and claim expenses? In case, under which category? A1 employees or equivalent, A2 natural persons, A3, or which category?
Well, if persons are not directly hired by the beneficiary itself, then they cannot be claimed under the personal costs. Then it are automatically costs for services. So it can also be these interim agencies or any other entity that is recruiting and that signs the contract. Then no, you will have to put it under services.
Thank you, Anne. Then we have a kind of simple question. Could you suggest the most suitable call for communication and awareness activities? Anne, or who can answer?
Well, I think maybe the best answer is look in the project database and see what projects have done. I mean, we can't tell you what to put into your project application, but you can find a lot of good examples in ongoing and past projects.
Thank you. Maybe the last question we take. Can the same applicant apply as lead applicant for more than one project in the same call? Where a university, each department applies for the calls. So do we have to support as university just one proposal as lead partners?
So maybe I can say that an applicant can apply for various proposals and various calls. That's fully correct. And I understand that the second half of the question is a different one, right? If various departments should participate in the same proposal, or should they be listed as various applicants, if that's what I'm understanding correctly? Well, it depends which topic you're submitting under as well. I mean, is it the same proposal you're looking at or not? I mean, we sometimes see a department of a university involved in one proposal and a different department in another one, or the same department can be involved in various proposals. Now, if it's various departments of the same university in the same proposal, I assume it would be easier to have the university being involved and as one applicant. But unless I misunderstood, yeah, I'm sorry, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think the short answer is that a university can be involved in more than one application and indeed more than one ongoing project. So there's no problem there.
Okay, so do we close here or do we continue another 5 minutes?
I think we could take a couple more and I'm happy to tackle the next one there.
Yes, a couple more questions. Can the project finance the costs of a consultant who would be responsible for project management, monitoring of indicators, reporting, etc.? Could such an advisor act as a consortium member in the project? This, I suppose, is for Anne Vermeulen.
Well, as I already mentioned, you need to make sure that you don't outsource or you don't contract coordination tasks of the coordinator. In that case, if you don't have the capacity yourself, the easiest would be to have a consultant, but a natural person that is hired by the coordinator to help with these typical tasks. Could such advisor act as a consortium member? There, again, if this entity would then also do coordination tasks, no. So, and if it's only to assist for administrative or for monitoring project management type of things, I'm not so sure. So, but this is more technical. But in general, I can say that coordination tasks, which in fact involve monitoring of the proper implementation, intermediary of communications with the agency and distribution of payments, they cannot be given to any other entity in the project. So it cannot be to the affiliated entity, it cannot be to other beneficiaries, it can also not be subcontracted.
Thank you, Anne. So another question, maybe the last one. If my project includes categories from multiple calls, how do I decide which call to apply to? Maybe for Anne Barrel?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is it's up to you to decide. You need to read the calls carefully and decide which you fit most closely to. I would add that at least under the standard action projects, if your project is very substantially contributing to more than one goal of the LIFE program, it might get bonus points. But it's up to you to choose.
Okay, I see now, Anne, that you suggest to answer all the questions with at least 3 likes. So if everybody agrees, we can continue. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think there are just a couple more that
Just a
came
few
out
more.
there.
All
So
right.
let's try to cover those ones. And I think the submission of questions is closed now on the site, no?
There are a few questions that have no likes, maybe.
I think there's 4 more that have 3 or more likes. So let's try to do
yes.
those ones.
Okay, thank you for your availability. So next question is, could you please explain more about the legal or capital link between the beneficiary and affiliated entities, particularly the part starting in neither limited to the actions and so on? Perhaps make an example. So
Okay,
what is the legal link between the beneficiary and affiliated entities, I suppose, with coordinator and affiliates?
Okay, so first of all, because it was mentioned particularly with regard to this neither limited to the actions, this means that the link to the beneficiary should already exist. So you cannot just set it up to implement the project. What do we mean with the legal link? This is a permanent legal structure that is put in place. For example, you can have associations that work with members. So if the association is in the grant agreement, is a beneficiary, the members of this organization can become affiliated entities because there is then a legal link. It can also be existing collaboration agreements that are in place. There, the same could be done. It can also be that it is the member who is the beneficiary and the association that is then the affiliate. So it works in both ways. The capital link, this is more like for the in private organizations, the entities that are under direct or indirect control, or directly or indirectly controlling the same entity, or under the same direct or indirect control. So the affiliated entities, the affiliates of a private organization. This is then a capital link. So the shareholders that are linked to the entity in our grant agreement.
Thank you. Next question. What is the difference between in-kind contribution against payment and volunteer?
Well, in fact, in-kind contributor against payment, in case we are talking about staff cost, this would be seconded persons. Like there is an entity that in return of payment would put one of his staff members with the beneficiary to execute tasks, but the beneficiary will have to pay the staff costs related to this person. So they will reimburse the other organization. A volunteer is just a volunteer that is working for free. So it is 2 different things.
Yes. I would like to ask, says this applicant, whether there is a minimum number of years an NGO must have been established in order to be eligible to submit a proposal under the LIFE program.
The short answer is no, but Anne Vermeulen may want to comment on the financial capacity checks, because we do need to have financial capacity checks done on that.
Well, I think in any case, any organization that participates in a call needs to demonstrate that they have the operational as well as the financial capacity to carry out the project. So in that sense, if the entity would be private and coordinator, then we will do also financial capacity check. But of course, I would not recommend an entity that is only established for a very short period to maybe act as coordinator immediately. I'm not sure. It can, theoretically it can, but yeah, maybe to demonstrate the operational and the financial capacity, it might not be the best choice.
Thanks. Another question. Can there be changes to the budget during the life of the project? Is an amendment necessary?
Well, there are in principle no more percentages like in the past LIFE program. If you go over the 20% of budget shifts that you need an amendment, this is no longer valid. However, of course, you cannot do shifts that would call in to question the award of the grant. And then for certain cost categories, it is just impossible to do a budget shift without amendment. This is financial support to third parties and for volunteers, for example. But for all the other cases, it is normally possible. For subcontracting, if it was not foreseen, certain subcontracting tasks, then there is also the simplified approval that is possible. Of course, before the closure of the project, at the last moment, it would then have to go through the reporting. But if it are, I would say, for subcontracting, if it was not foreseen and are very high amounts, it would always be better to check this up front.
And it can never be an amendment to increase the total amount of the budget of the grant.
Okay, thanks. Are there recommendations as to where subcontracting costs should be detailed in the application to allow a proper financial assessment of the proposed work packages? The detailed budget table seems to allow only for limited description.
Well, I think that the tasks that need to be carried out need to be described in the technical part of the proposal. And then if certain of these tasks, because we already mentioned that subcontracting is the outsourcing of specific action tasks. So it is not just delivering support to do something, it is really carrying out this particular task instead of one of the beneficiaries. And then, of course, you can just refer in the budget table to this particular task because you already describe in the technical part what this task contains. So you don't need to put a lot in the detailed budget table on what this subcontractor is going to do because you normally already describe it.
So can we take a few more questions? The next
Let's
question.
just take one more. If
One
I
more.
see there's one on climate change, which has been pushed to the climate session.
Okay.
I can take them.
Well, but it's been moved to the climate session, that
Okay,
one, so it
very
should
good.
be for tomorrow.
Yes, because it's not really relevant
No.
today.
Yeah, but
It is more a financial
tomorrow.
question, that one. It's not really a
Okay,
climate
go ahead.
question. So they say that I understand that the funding rate is 60%. Does this rate also apply to non-profit organizations or can they receive up to 95%? No, all beneficiaries in a grant have a maximum percentage that is the percentage detailed in the call. So if it's 60%, it's 60%. If it's 95%, it's 95%. It doesn't change depending on the type of organization.
Okay, I see Anne Burrell volunteer for the last question. Can we see it?
Yes, as long as I get over my cough.
Where machinery is placed and operated outside the EU, for instance, Morocco, but beneficiary for the EU environment also eligible.
Yeah, I mean, the life regulation is quite clear that generally activities may only take place inside the EU member states or other countries that participate in life. There is the possibility of exceptions, but the exceptions can only be there if it is essential to undertake an activity outside of the EU that cannot be undertaken inside the EU, and that is being done because of the need to provide some kind of result that will lead to the achievement of the objectives inside the EU. So it's an exceptional situation. I mean, placing machinery outside of the EU just because it might be cheaper to run is not a reason for it to be accepted. It must be really something that is essential and must be clearly justified. I don't know, Anne, do you want to comment further?
No, it's
okay.
Exactly what it should be.
Okay, I think this was the last question. We already answered much longer than initially planned because it's 12:15. And I see that our colleagues from the back office are telling us that the questions can be retrieved during the question and answer session tomorrow. There will be an extra Q&A session at 3:45. So if your question wasn't answered today, please come back tomorrow. And you can always also ask the question if it's more relevant for a specific call during the info session related to that call. So please make sure that the question is asked at the right time to have more chances to get an answer. Now, I would like to thank all our colleagues, our speakers. But before I say goodbye, well, thank you for all your answers that I think were very clarifying and very enlightening for most of our audience. But before we say goodbye, I would like to launch another poll to ask our audience if they were satisfied with this overall session today. Today it was the opening plenary session. So there was first a presentation on all the calls that are now published on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal, and then the presentation on the financial aspects of the calls and of the applications. And then there was this question and answer session. And therefore, we would like to know if you are or how satisfied you are of the whole opening plenary session. And so I would ask my colleagues to launch the Slido poll. You will find it on Slido. And can you please reply? There are four options, whether you are very satisfied, slightly satisfied, not satisfied, or slightly unsatisfied. And that's very important for us. So please take a few seconds to give us this feedback so that we know how glad you are or how happy you are with the information you have received today, and that we can improve for the next year, EU Life Info Days. So thanks a lot for taking the time to give us your feedback. And for now, I have to close this session, and I would say see you tomorrow for the sessions on the standard action projects. And then also the day after, we will also present more calls, so stay tuned. And thank you for your attention today and for your participation. See you soon. Bye-bye.